At the time that this video goes up, it will most likely have been less than 2 weeks since Visual Arts announced that it will be giving 100% ownership of the company over to Tencent. Many of you might know Tencent. It's the giant game conglomerate which has been making the rounds lately due to the fact that they've been trying to purchase shares in as many game companies as they could. You might know them due to the fact that they own a majority shareholding in Riot Games now. They own 40% of Epic Games, and they have been slowly reaching their hand into as many companies as they can. So as someone working in the game industry, I decided to look more into this. I reached out to a bunch of my contacts, some of whom are still working in Tencent, some who have left the company. I reached out to companies that could get me in touch or at least get me information on the current state of visual arts. And so I've been looking into all of that, trying to figure out as much as I can about the situation. So today let's talk about two things. First of which would be, let's talk about the background of it all, what led to this situation in the first place. And before that, let me just quickly introduce both of these companies involved in this entire thing we're talking about today. The first one of which is Visual Arts. Visual Arts is a company that's famous for making visual novels. They own the rather famous visual novel brand Key, and Key has been responsible for the creation of some of the most successful and well-known visual novels that exist out there, such as the one about the necroleptic main character, the one about TK, and the one with a name that kind of reminded me of another Japanese band, which kind of confused me at the start of it. And aside from visual novels, they also do get involved in many other forms of media as well. They also dabble into animation, making many other animes in the past, including their most recent title, the one that got Maeda Jun bullied off Twitter temporarily when it first released, as well as music, with the music label that they created actually being quite important in the history of visual novels because it was the first ever label to successfully get its music performed live in Budokan. And for those of you who didn't know, Budokan is basically the biggest music performance goal for most artists out there. Like, typically most musicians, when they say that they want to get famous, the one way that they will conceptualize it is being able to perform in the Budokan. Meanwhile, Tencent is a Chinese gaming conglomerate, a company that has slowly been going around trying to buy out as many companies from as many fields of technology as it can, not just gaming. And it is now quite famous for having purchased a large shareholding of many companies, including Clive Games, the creators of Don't Starve, as well as Riot Games. And they have made many attempts at trying to purchase other studios as well. But suffice to say, they have expanded to a very massive proportion right now. For perspective, they are a company that has purchased and I think are currently running close to 600 other different brands. So yeah, this ain't a small company we're talking about. And it follows in the trend of Chinese companies in that era where they were going around the world purchasing up other companies as a quick and fast way to expand their own technological capabilities, and are currently known as one of the most successful companies out there right now due to the fact that they're earning a lot of money. Though I guess when you own as many successful brands as they are, it just comes naturally whether or not they would put in that much effort, but that's besides the point. Let us now begin talking about the background of this specific situation. So recently I just covered the shutting down of the game studio Illusion. They are a adult game studio responsible for the creation of some of the biggest titles in their industry such as Koikatsu, and they are known as one of the 4 big adult game creators in Japan. And when I covered that situation, we talked a lot about how there is no true way for us to know what happened because not only was it very sudden, but there was no information given as to why all of this was happening. And for the case of visual arts, while it is also quite sudden, like just 2 months ago, I actually just spoke to the owner of the company, Mr. Barber. It sounds a bit off. Baba Shacho, let's just call him that if I need to refer to him. It feels awkward using English, I apologize, because I have to speak like that a lot in Japan as well. Just live it as is. I'm not like some weird weeb or something, alright? So I just spoke to him 2 months ago and none of this was even mentioned. So at the very least, he had kept it under wraps from a lot of people at the time. And so all of this really did come as a surprise to most of the industry as well. That said, unlike with the situation with Illusion, in this case, we actually have a very good understanding of why he decided to do all of this, because of the fact that all of this was put up in a very long blog post on the company's official website as well. Yeah, I know blogs sound like a very boomer thing, but the guy's 63, alright, cut him some slack. And on the blog post, it does go into explanation of the multiple reasons why he decided to do this. So the first reason that he mentioned was due to the fact that he acknowledges that he was getting old. The boomer. And he was kind of worried that due to the fact that he doesn't really have a competent next of kin for whom he can pass the company to and expect them to run it well, he decided that the best option available to him would be to give it over to another company that has a lot of experience with running game companies in a successful manner. And so he looked to Tencent. And this brings us to the second reason that he mentioned, which was that his goal and what he wanted to see from the company in the future was for visual arts to become an even more globalized company than what it is now. And so he decided that the best way to do that is to reach out to a company with a lot of understanding of helping companies to expand globally or to run companies that have very global reach, especially when you consider the fact that they do own companies such as Riot, and they also do manage companies such as Epic Games to a large extent as one of the major shareholders. They do have quite a lot of reach and pull when it comes to dealing with game companies globally. In the blog post, he also does reassure everyone that this is not all due to the financial state of the company being so bad that he desperately had to do this in order to keep the company afloat by selling it. In fact, he does mention that this year was actually the highest profit year for visual arts in its entire 33 years of existence. And that comes at no surprise due to the fact that Heaven Burns Red has been extremely successful. So successful, in fact, that that game was actually considered on the Google Play Store the best game of 2022. So we are talking about a game that was that massive for a company that arguably never made games or content that was on the scale of a giant mobile game. So needless to say, this was a very massive year for them. And so we can quite likely see that this is probably not due to a finance side issue. Granted that costs would have increased with them trying to run a gacha game, but when you talk about a game with that level of pull, it's quite likely not the case that they were losing money. On top of that, I did also on my end reach out to a bunch of hiring recruitment firms to double check with them on the status of visual arts itself, and what I got back from them is that visual arts, even during the last 3-month period, was still hiring very aggressively. So it's not like they had halted recruitment or something during this period due to fears that they would not be able to pay their staff, or due to the fact that the company was transferring very early on and therefore the plans were in the works and they didn't want to hire people out of a fear of how the company will get restructured after. And that brings us to the next point that he mentions in the blog post, which is that he wants visual arts to remain visual arts. Baba Shacho, I mean, not Tencent. And that as a result, he still wants the company to continue as a visual novel first sort of company. And so the goal of selling everything over to Tencent is not to let Tencent turn the entire company into a mobile gaming company and let them turn every single past IP into one of those gacha games out there. Because what you need to understand is that visual arts is 100% owned by Baba Shacho. He is the single owner of it and is a private firm as a result. Therefore, if he were to die, it would just then be transferred almost like to his next of kin or something. And since he felt his next of kin as someone who probably wouldn't be good enough to take over, that was why he decided to make this decision instead. The fact of the matter is that opening up a company to shareholders, while it does bring in a lot of investment for the company, it also comes with the risk that the company would lose its capability to be as innovative as it always had been before. Hence, it's understandable why he kept 100% ownership and why he wants to transfer it as 100% to another company like this, so that that company can continue to run it without outside interference. Another thing that you have to understand about Heaven Burns Red is that the game was apparently so successful that they actually managed to argue for a better acquisition deal with Tencent. As a result of how successful this game was, I think there was some mention by Baba Shacho too, that he was thankful to Maeda Jun for actually putting them in this situation, due to the fact that if not for the fact that they made that game, this deal could have been a lot worse for visual arts. So yeah, we are talking about a game that was very successful. Makes me feel a little mixed that it had to be a gacha game that would put them in this situation, but arguably with the way visual novels are in terms of popularity, it's very hard to see them having made the same level of success if they had not done this. So yeah, it feels a little awkward, but it is what it is. So let's move on to point number 2, which is how likely is all of this to impact visual arts itself? Because for fans of the company, this is likelier to be the thing that all of them are more worried about whether or not this company which they had known and loved, which managed to stay true to its vision because of the fact that the company is owned by one dude, how much would it now change as a result of the fact that a big Chinese conglomerate is the one in control of it? And not just that, but a company that has also been one that has always been mobile and browser gaming first, so a company that's likely to be more focused on gacha games or loot box games. How much would they cost visual arts to change as a result of all of this is the thing that will be on most people's minds. So China as a country has been in a rather turbulent state right now when it comes to the game industry, what with the Chinese government calling gaming a digital opium, which is that was something. That, and there also has been the clampdown on just giant conglomerates in general, on top of the fact that they've been putting a lot of pressure on Tencent to prevent it from expanding even more. So everything I'm saying now is based off what I know, what my contacts within Tencent or ex-Tencent employees know, and what people I know within the game industry who have worked around visual arts or Tencent have spoken about. So all of it is what is true now, but depending on how the country turns out in the future, considering how big Tencent is and how much of a stake it has in China, things might change for the worse, potentially, is my worry. But there's no way for us to know based off all of that, because this is all going to go into things like economics of the country in general, which I can't speak for that. We don't know what Tencent's game plan is for if the country suddenly does extremely badly, so we'll leave all of that out for now. Based off all the information that is available to us now, can we say that Tencent is likely to cause significant change in visual arts? So I reached out to some of my friends who are still working in Tencent or in some of their subsidiaries, and for the most part it would seem that when it comes to Tencent, while they do have ownership over all of these different companies and brands, they don't tend to intervene within the way that the studios that they acquire are run. And this is due to the fact that they know that the studios that they are acquiring are studios that are doing well, and they want these studios to continue producing games that will reach out to the world as they have always been. Which is why when you look at most of their acquisitions, they tend to be acquisitions of companies that are successful to some extent, not companies that are failing and they want to turn around. This is all part of their own business strategy of mergers and acquisitions to grow the company and to get more technology on their side so that they can use all of this technology in their own separate studios, which is where most of their heavily controlled development goes on in. Which is why you see that Clay Entertainment, the company that made Don't Starve, is still making the games that they have always been making, in spite of the fact that they got acquired by Tencent in 2021. You look at Riot Games, they aren't exactly making a lot of mobile games, gacha games now. I mean they did make that one card game, and the card games are technically gacha games, so they did make the one, but as you can see, they're just on a whole expanding more into different forms of media instead, and that is the way that the company has been moving ahead. It's not like the whole concept of Tencent's browser and gacha games has become the main focal point of even a company like Riot. Even when it's something like Path of Exile, where the game already has microtransactions, they were not aggressively seeking to change the way microtransactions work within this game. So at the very least, it should be safe for us to assume that for the time being, if nothing too much changes within the political climate of China to force this company to change their ways of operating, we should continue to see a forward trend of them continuing this trend of, at the very least, not forcing the companies that they acquire to change. And instead, if they really wanted to produce their own content, they would probably produce it on the side in one of their own studios instead. Looking at Tencent's track record up to this point, it really does feel like this acquisition is just more so that they can get a hold of the rights as well as the personnel that are working at visual arts more so than anything else. Things like, one, getting a hold of the rights to the kinetic visual novels that visual arts has been priding themselves on for quite a while now, which, while you might argue, for those of you who do not know, the kinetic visual novel system is one where you play a visual novel, but instead of actually getting choices to make throughout, like in your dating sims, this one is just quite literally, like the name implies, a visual novel that moves along kinetically. So you don't have to do anything, it just plays and you just read it from start to end, kind of like a book, except that you can just push an auto button and the book flips the pages for you instead. Very convenient tech, I know. They are very good at writing stories as well, and it feels like their ability to come up with good narratives is another reason why they might have been acquired by Tencent, due to the fact that if they could get a hold of the personnel and this personnel choose not to quit, this would mean that writers such as Maeda Jun, as well as all the many other assistant writers within visual arts, would now be personnel who would be available to Tencent and their ecosystem to some extent at the very least, if there's ever a need for them to come up with even more compelling stories of their own in the future. They would have this set of skilled writers who, even if they don't shift them off directly into another company to work for that company, they could still get them to do like internal talks, tutorials for the company itself, which we probably would never know about. I know many other game companies that are very big do this as well, where they have their own internal tutorial systems where they get their more veteran staff to come up and talk and explain stuff to the more junior staff, and this is something we might see in the future perhaps, which might be why they decided to acquire all of this talent instead. They are going to have access to a company with a lot of very popular IPs, and that has experience not only in gaming but in animation as well as music, so there is actually a lot in terms of assets that they could acquire, and this might be a very large part of why they are doing this in the first place. Then there's also the fact that because visual arts is becoming the subsidiary of a company from China, and a large part of that company's player base is also from China, there's also the concern that certain content is going to get censored out as well. Like, for example, when you look at games like Blue Archive, there's the fact that the game had gotten censored so hard that a lot of the character art that had already been censored once for the all ages release globally had to be censored even more to ensure they could fit with the Chinese government's regulations. Now, what can I say? The Chinese government, they just really don't like ass and titties as much as the rest of the world does, it seems like. That, and there's also the fact that the Chinese government has been quite well known for committing certain very questionable actions, and there's also the worry, of course, that perhaps all of this would be things that the company, Visual Arts, would no longer be able to mention in the future, but from the looks of it, Visual Arts has largely steered clear from all of that. Most of their games don't really take place in our world, but in a fictional world very similar to ours, so I highly doubt that there's gonna be any issue if they're just gonna continue producing the types of content that they are going forward. Maybe we'll see a few Chinese characters pop up in their future games, that's about it, kind of like what Hollywood did. But aside from that, I don't think there's gonna be too much in the way of censorship that is gonna affect them. But that's it, that's all I really have to say for this video. Thank you all for watching till this point. If there's anything I missed out or anything you feel could have been explained better, do feel free to let me know in the comments down below. As you all have seen from most of my other videos, I tend to reply to all of them. Channel is super small, so not too much of an issue trying to do that. But that said, if you happen to have enjoyed this video, do feel free to leave a like, maybe give it a subscribe. Also, I have a Discord channel now, thanks to the wonderful efforts of Snorlaxo. So if you wanna just hop in and chill with us, or just to see what my future video schedule is like, you can see it there, as I tend to upload both my stream as well as video schedules there now. So if you're interested in that, do feel free to look at it there. That said, this kind of more of the cuff video. I don't know how often I'll do it. Like, reporting on current events is like, it's something that I genuinely do enjoy to talk about, although there's also a part of me that doesn't want to do it due to the fact that it's very hard to gather enough information to come up with a more comprehensive explanation that allows me to give you guys the best information on the situation out there. So a bit of a mixed bag for me, and so I tend to shy away from it if there isn't as much information out there to properly talk about the situation. That, and I'm doing all of this alone, so trying to video edit all of this on the fly whenever something happens is a bit taxing. But that said, do let me know if you guys enjoy this type of videos as well. I won't do like this kind of current event stuff, happening now stuff all the time, but once in a while when it's related to the game industry, particularly to Japan's game industry, you might see my face pop out here and there, so my apologies. But that's it. I'll be heading off for now. Thank you all for watching this video once again, you wonderful people. Take care and bye-bye.